2 p.m. in Eastern America. It is 10 p.m. in East Africa. And we want to welcome you on this special edition. As you can see, our scholar and expert, an activist, a warrior, scholar, renowned public speaker. As you all know who he is not here for the first time. This great African scholar whose heart beat for his people and who's been writing a couple of books is sitting right here again for the second time to share with us this wonderful conversation. And yes, if you're joining, please make sure you click the link and share, as we have a lot to discuss on this topic. But also, Dr. Obati Shaka is going to be telling us about where we can constantly follow him if he's not on the Pan-African Daily TV. And we all know that he's very active. He has his own platform where he hosts his show, the Dr. Oba Show. So we're going to be sharing the link, and we want to know what times is it often so we can also join in and get into more lectures, particularly when he comes just once in a while on the platform. It will be necessary for us to, join him on his show and learn a lot from this. So yes, we'll be going into those conversations, but of course, our topic for today is very broad, but very strategic and important because these are issues that face us on our daily lives. And we've been asking a lot of questions. How were our ancestors living before? How were the relationships? And today, yes, he's going to be lecturing us on how our families and relationships were before colonialism. And as we know, he's an expert and has written a lot of books on family, spirituality, culture, history, whatever. So it's another pleasure to you once again, Dr. Obati Shaka. And today you're in white and gold. And I always feel jealous when from your attires and your look. It's like, wow, I should have also been looking like that. Now I'll start checking out even what my guests will be putting up, particularly this kind of stock statement, so that we kind of have a dress code on the Pan-African Daily TV. Anyway, let's go into the conversation. But I will start by welcoming and greeting you, Professor. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and I really enjoyed our last conversation, and I've been checking your show out. I understand that you had Dr. Theophile Obenga on a day or so ago, and they founded a university in Congo Brazzaville. He's a colleague of mine, and he left the Bay Area, went back to Congo Brazzaville with that purpose, and it's a university dedicated to his name. He's the best scholar on ancient Kemet in the world, multidimensional scholar. So I was glad to see that you had him on. And I understand Dr. Wade Nobles was on your show as well.
Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Wade Noble is coming next week on Saturday. Dr. Jeffries was on, and Professor James Small, yes.
Okay. And was Obenga on your show?
Yes, he was, even though we had him just for, I think, 10 minutes and the light went out, went off out there in the Congo, but we'll be having him again because this university, as these projects that you all have been working on, I think it's really time to bring it on the limelight. The aspirants have to know, or they need to know if they can enroll their kids there, or what is the curriculum like. So what do you think a university like that could be of essence to us as Africans?
Well, first of all, the fact that Dr. Obenga played the leading role in shaping it means that it's going to have a foundation in African history, African culture. And he is the foremost scholar on ancient Kemet, or ancient Egypt, in the world today. He's Sheikh Anta Diop's best student. He speaks 10 languages. He's written 17 books. He's finishing his 18th on the Pharaoh that's over 1,000 pages long. And though he went through formal French training for his PhD, he really apprenticed under Sheikh Anta Diop. And Sheikh Anta Diop really shaped him in his African consciousness. So I would expect that what Dr. Obenga will be doing the university, which is named after him, Theophile Obenga University, it's going to have a solid grounding in African history and culture. One of his specialties is also philosophy, including Kemetic or Egyptian philosophy, as well as science, mathematics, all of the things that you need in the modern world. And I saw a brief shot of the university. It's brand new. They've been working on it for quite some time. The president of Congo Brazzaville is a former classmate of his. His uncle was vice president of Congo Brazzaville, and an honest person, would not take a penny unless it belonged to him. And Dr. Obenga is the same way. So I would expect it to be a rigorous institution, demanding and preparing Africans for building societies that'll empower them and take them out of poverty. So I'll be talking to him about specifically what's happened since he set this up with his president and the people who have worked with him. But I know his thinking. He stayed in my house for 4 months when we first hired him. He was tenured faculty for 12 years. I forced the university to give him more money than they ever gave anybody because I had kicked the president's behind, so he did what I told him. And in fact, he told me when he came in, Obenga's not very political. He's a scholar. He said, I need money, as in dollar bills, a lot of money. He said, a lot of universities want me. And he said, you have to pay me a lot of money. The truth is, a lot of universities should have wanted him, but they didn't because they were opposed to his paradigm, which is a paradigm to free Africa.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I told my dean, I was chair of Africana Studies, I told him, you have to give him the most money. And he got more money than anybody else ever got. And he got instant full professorship. So he stayed at my house for 4 months. We both were writing. I was doing my work. He was doing his. And then for 12 years, I got to interact with him. And I had interacted with him before. So it's not just that you need, Africa needs universities, but they need to be universities grounded in our culture, our history, our politics, and up to date and modern, preparing people for the 21st and 22nd century. So I know that that's the kind of university that's going to be, because that's Dr. Obenga, you know.
It is so amazing because, I mean, hardly would we have African scholars, and particularly those that are related to bring such kind of mega projects on the continent, that people actually would solicitate and say, yes, this is somebody that I know. And like you just said, he wouldn't take a penny that doesn't belong to him, or he would put it at the appropriate places. It is so difficult to hear about this kind of leadership and personalities on the continent of Africa, particularly when it has to do with developmental issues. Where do you think the problem lies?
In Africa?
Yes, Africans.
Many problems. The biggest problem is our estrangement or are being torn away from, and I'm talking about miseducated Africans, because Africans in the villages don't have this problem.
Correct.
But the people who are running Africa and the people who have been miseducated in African universities, they don't see the value of their own culture. Too many of them. Some do. Some in the younger generation do, but a lot do not. They think that modernization means being Western, you know? And if you look at any people that have been effective in the world, in this case, people of color, while they have certainly brought in science and technology and industrialization, now it needs to be brought in a new way so it doesn't pollute the environment. It rests on a cultural foundation that's their own. And the last time we talked about how the Japanese modernized and what's called the Meiji Restoration. They sent, in the 19th century, they sent some of their smartest young people to Europe and America to learn the science and technology. But it was under African cultural terms. But because of colonialism and slavery, we've had these breaks. So I think that the key thing is that we have to return to the source the strengths of African culture. Now, in terms of Africa, Africa's in worse shape today than it was at independence economically, you know, and this is largely due to bad leadership. It's also due to external forces. On my show, I talked about structural adjustment and how that worked in the 70s and 80s and 90s to tear up successful African economic projects. But if you look at the state of Africa today, I mean, when Africa started off in 1960, in the case of Ghana, in 1957, at independence, Ghana and South Korea were at the same point. Their per capita income was $200 a year. But if you're going to look at where South Korea is today and where Ghana is today, whereas South Korea was at $200, they have rose way above that. And in 2000, South Korea's income was 10 times greater than that of Ghana, 10 times, $4,400. Now that was in 2000, and Ghana's was 420. And we know that Nkrumah did some things to build up education, to build up healthcare, to build roads and hydroelectric power. So there were things that he did. And in his case, he was one of Africa's more visionary leaders. But that's the state of Ghana today. And Ghana began to move up, and then they came under structural adjustment, external forces that really wrecked their economy. Or if you look at Madagascar, and by the way, my people are from Madagascar on both sides. My mother, who had a memory like an elephant, maybe 5 years before she died, we were going across the bridge coming to my house. And I said, Mom, I said, what part of Africa do we come from? And she said, Mada? I said, Madagascar? She said, yeah. My great aunt, who lived to be 123 years of age and lived maybe well, see, enslaved Africans, that was not unusual. Enslaved Africans, the average age was 50, 55 because of slavery. We had a lot of people who lived 123, 126, 110 because they were practicing African health practices, and they were following the diet that I recommended last year, but the last show. By the way, I didn't point out, when you follow that diet, you increase your life expectancy by 20%.
Wow. You're going to do it again tonight, please.
Yeah. So she said, because she had left, I was in the South, and I was talking to one of her nieces, and she showed me her family Bible. And in the family Bible, my great aunt said that we came from Madagascar. So that's rare, because in the United States, Africans who were brought here from Madagascar came in the late 1700s, and then that was it. So in the case of Madagascar, between 1999, from 1960 to 1999, their per capita incomes in the 60s was $799. In Mali, it was $753. But then it rose to $1,258, but then declined now to $828.25, which is higher than the average per capita income in Africa, which is terrible. And then if you're going to look at countries that live below poverty in Africa, you have 29 African countries living below $2 a day. $2 a day. And then you have a sizable number of African countries that are living at $1 a day. Africa today now has over 233.5 million people living on $1 a day. You know what I mean? So that shouldn't be. I mean, yes, there are external forces. Yes, we were colonized and enslaved. And yes, so Africa has a more difficult task to rebuild itself. But still, we can't blame it all on colonialism, and we can't blame it all on neo-colonialism, though that is a big part. We have to blame it on also our leaders who have had the opportunities to take the richest continent on the planet, a continent that has the richest number of mineral resources in the world: palladium, uranium, chromium, vanadium, gold, oil, you name it. And yet the investors who invest in Africa are getting rich. Japanese investors, European investors, American investors, Chinese investors. But Africa is getting poor. Of course, their leaders are getting rich. But what they're getting is the crumbs off of whatever has come into their country. I mean, in the case of Nigeria, all of its oil wealth has been stolen. All of it. I mean, if you want to talk about gangsterism, that's pure gangsterism. Or in the case of the Congo, the former head of the Congo, Mobutu, had what was called a kleptocracy, meaning he took everything. Now you have dishonesty all over the world. The Asians have their dishonesty. There's dishonesty in China, but they took 400 million people out of poverty. And to keep their party in power, the head of China has carried out some persecution against some dishonest people, even though there's some other dishonest people he'll never touch. But their dishonesty does not go to the point of stripping the people of their opportunity to grow. And in fact, China has really changed the demographics on poverty because they're the main country that's taking people out of poverty. America isn't. The poor are getting poorer in this country. So the models for leadership, the ideas of leadership, the systems of leadership, the attitudes that leaders have towards their own people have been a big part of this problem. And mainly their alienation from their culture. Also, their alienation from the appreciation of the ability of their people, because Africa has within its continent all that you need to really grow successful economies and to create prosperity. I mean, I think most African nations would be well off if they didn't have a single president and the farmers of Africa could just do their farming. I mean, that's not real. I know we're going to have leaders, but I'm simply saying that the people are gifted. I mean, this is the continent with the oldest history, the richest culture. And if you're going to come to agriculture, which is the basis for development, they're the best agriculturalists in the world. And if you let them do their thing and then help them out, give them some ideas on other things that can improve agriculture and everything else, but you build on what they know, Africa would be prosperous. And you have to start development at an agricultural level, and then you move to other levels. But if you don't get the agricultural economy straight, then the things that you want to do with industrialization and stuff are fantasies. So, and it's the people of Africa that have those skills. And too often the people in leadership have created policies around agricultural development that has favored the elite, not favored the people. And they basically creamed off the wealth that comes out of agriculture and put it in their own pockets and left the people to have to deal in illegal economies and do their best to survive. So I would say that the biggest problem that Africa faces is not having the confidence, and I'm not talking about Africa, but its leaders, too many, and not all of them, but most of them, not having the confidence in their own history and their own culture, and not having the imagination to draw from the best of that. So it's a lot, but I think that's the key thing. The last time I talked about the European nation state model that Africa inherited, that is a model, again, it's based on someone else's culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is designed for the advancement of someone else. And these European nation state models do not really advance Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
They've done better than Africa, but they've been exploited. And in America, one reason that Trump came into office is that he appealed to the anger of the masses of whites who not only hate blacks, fear immigration, but hate the economic circumstances they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Blame that on their elite. Correctly, they just adopted another member of the elite that doesn't care for them, but sold them fake populism. But so America has this problem in spades or in big numbers because the rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poor. And so, but again, for us in America, we have to appreciate our culture. Our biggest weakness in the United States is African Americans do not appreciate their greatest strength, which is our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Some African Americans don't even think they have one. And yet the world knows it's the culture of popular choice throughout the world. Africans know that, and some of us do, but many of us do not. So we have to appreciate what we have. The jewel in our crown, which is our culture, and then everything else.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for brushing on that part of the conversation. But today we want to talk about why are our families in Africa weaker today than independence? I mean, what are the tips what is it that we need to know, and how can we solve this problem?
Well, that was a metaphor. That was a show that I did last week. And if you go to the Dr. Obenga show, you can see it. That was a metaphor for why is Africa in worse shape than it was at independence. But the family is the mirror of that. And if you're doing well, your families will do well. There's an old saying that you can measure the progress of African people by the level of their women. If the women are high and strong, if they're economically prosperous, if they're politically engaged and powerful, then of course they're going to be prospering economically. If the women are doing well, the people will be doing well. And why is that? Because the woman looks out for the family. The woman looks out for the children. And we know in Africa, it's African women who are really holding Africa up. They run the economy, which is basically agricultural, and they feed Africa. And they are the most exploited group, along with children. So why is the African family in worse shape than it was in 1960? It's because of the way in which African societies operated after independence. The example I gave on the Dr. Obenga show was structural adjustment, to show how that worked, and how when the International Monetary Fund and World Bank came into Africa in the 70s and the 80s, they took advantage of any crisis that existed in Africa and gave them a prescription. And it's kind of like if you're going to a doctor and you're sick and you have a heart problem, someone is going to give you an answer for your legs or for your toe, or instead of operating on your heart, operating on your foot. So in the case of structural adjustment, this is a mirror for what went wrong. With independence, Africa got these small states that had nothing to do with the original nations that we had prior to independence. And in some cases, like Nigeria, or in the case of Ethiopia, because it was a whole state and not colonized except for a short period of time, you got a large state or a mini large state in South Africa. But in most cases, small states cut up and bordering countries that were really a part of their nations. And so they were tied more to Europe than they were to their neighboring countries. And we call this neocolonialism or indirect economic rule. So these small nations could not really stand up against the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, the United States, or Europe, or the European Union. So visionary leaders like Kwame Nkrumah wanted a United States of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That would take a long time to achieve, and that's necessary. But that was also frustrated. You had the Organization of African Unity, which was the vision of George Padmore. George Padmore was the advisor to Kwame Nkrumah. He was the principal organizer of the Fifth Pan-African Congress. His real name was Malcolm Nurse. He came from Trinidad, and Nkrumah apprenticed under him in the Fifth Pan-African Congress, and then brought him back to Ghana as his principal advisor. So he was the person that advised Nkrumah, and this is according to John Henry Clark, one of our great scholars who I apprenticed under, and a number of us have. He advised Nkrumah to form the Organization of African Unity. Nkrumah's goal was to unify Africa. Nkrumah's goal was that he wanted to see that the combined power of Africa would make it a power in the world and would uplift Africans. But you had all kinds of forces working against that. You had the Monrovia Group, which was more conservative, tied to the United States. You had these various blocs, and the US and Western Europe was in there playing one side against the other. So that while you had the African Union, or the Organization of Africa, the OAU, it, as Julius Nyerere said, it really wasn't Pan-African, because one of the principles in the Organization of African Unity was that one nation could not interfere in the affairs of another.
Absolutely.
So if one is creating genocide, you can't say anything about it. So the African Union is supposed to be an improvement on that. But the fact is that these unions that we form can only be as strong as the parts, and the parts are not working. And so in the case of Africa, the question is, why is the African family weaker today than it was in 1960? There are a lot of reasons. And one is, of course, we've had the intervention of external forces, structural adjustment being one. One is that African leaders, instead of shaping economic policies based on the needs of the people and respecting the people who are the base of their economy, the farmers, they came in dictating to the people. And they came in setting prices for crops. In Ghana, at one point, under one government in Ghana, saying that marketplaces were an instrument of colonialism, when we know that the marketplace is one of the key ways in which African commerce took place, and it was run by women. And you had women in Ghana actually whipped because they were setting a price that the government thought was too high for the goods that they were selling. And in fact, African systems operate on this idea of, in a market, you will have things of a similar quality, agricultural goods in the same area. And so you can't set a price too high if you want your goods to sell. So instead of following the best systems that worked under African governance, where villages were allowed, farmers were allowed to make the basic economic decisions, what we have with many of these independent African nations is the nations were making the decisions at the top. And usually it was one person or a party. And so they were determining the price of goods, or even determining what goods could be sold. In the case of Ghana, cocoa was its major export crop, because that's the crop that drew money in foreign exchange. That's run by women. And Ghana made a big mistake in keeping the price that the government would pay to cocoa growers low, because the government wanted to use that money to invest in economic development projects. And of course, that was good. But you have to give the farmers a profit for whatever they grow. That is how an economy grows. The people who are doing the work have to profit from it. And yeah, the government can get a part to advance the country, but it can't be a lion's share. And it cannot go into the pockets of a few in urban centers. And of course, we know with independence, you ended up with one-party states often, and you ended up often with states run by one person. The president of Ivory Coast, who stole most of the money in his country, said, the country, I am the state, and I don't listen to anybody. I do whatever I want to do. And of course, he built him a Catholic monstrosity costing so much money that had he invested that in agriculture, his people would have been more prosperous. So one of the problems for African leaders is they did not have the trust and confidence in what in Swahili is called the Wananchi, or the everyday people. And they inherited this European nation state where one person could make decisions. In a few cases, these one persons happen to be good, like Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, but in the end, no government should be in the hands of one person. So there are a lot of reasons for this state that Africa is in that it should not be in, greed being a major one in terms of leaders. And very often, and I think this is a general rule, when you have movements like we had African independence movements, in Asia, you had armed struggles in the case of the Chinese Revolution. In Cuba, you had the revolution in Cuba. Very often, the people that lead an independence movement or a liberation struggle, they should step down when the struggle is ended. Most of them did not have the skills to run a nation. Mm-hmm. I would say this, a lot of my revolutionary friends are not going to like this. I think it would have been better if Castro at least shared leadership, because he was a great leader. He had good healthcare system, good medical care system, excellent sports system, and a great spy system. And it kept him alive. The U.S. tried to kill him 400 times. He knew every time they were making a move. They were very good at that. But they have a saying in Cuba. The revolution's been good at everything except breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's because while Castro was good at education, he himself was an educated man, was himself a good athlete, and could appreciate healthcare. He didn't understand economics. And so as a result, you doctors in Cuba, some of the best doctors in the world, making $20 a month.
Oh.
So I always point out, you can't just blame that on the embargo, because Cuba was able to create a medical system, an educational system, in spite of the embargo, but could not build an effective economy. I think now they're trying to. And what are they calling it? Cooperative democracy. When Chancellor Williams went to the villages of Africa in Ghana, Chancellor Williams was one of our great scholars. He wrote the book, Destruction of African Civilization. But his greatest book is called Rebirth of African Civilization. And no publishers paid him. He mortgaged his house and he went to Ghana and he interviewed thousands of Ghanaians. Kwame Nkrumah supported him in this work. Unfortunately, he didn't follow his advice. And he asked the Ghanaian people one question. What kind of system did they want when Africa was free? Because he was there during the independence struggle in the 50s. They said they didn't want capitalism. They didn't want Marxism. They wanted cooperative democracy. And that means communalism. They wanted the system they already had, which was the air, land, and water shared. Everybody has a right to use it. And people make decisions collectively. That's the democracy, cooperatively. And what they said was, we want the national leaders to come to us, consult with us. Whenever they have a project they want to do, we will give them their input. And once you've consulted with the people, you've got our approval, go ahead. And Nkrumah was well-intentioned, but he didn't do that. He had his own projects, his own ideas. Some of them were great. But that failure to do that, but the main thing, not just in Nkrumah, but throughout Africa, allowing the people who run the economy, who run the agrarian economy, to have the biggest say so. And that's how African nations worked. The economy was run at the local level, the village level. And if you had kings and queens, like in Ghana, you had the king in charge of the gold nuggets, and then the gold dust, the people had access to it. But other than that, and there was some taxation, but limited. But other than that, the people made all the decisions economically, and Africa prospered on that basis. Now that has to be modernized, updated. There are some things that national governments have to do, but the fact is, if you look at China, when China made its miracle, it was after Mao died, because Mao was in power too long. He was good for the revolution. He was not so good for economic development. But when Deng Xiaoping came in, what did he do? He pulled together teams of people for development. And but the key thing he did is he said he didn't care what color cat was, as long as it caught mice. In other words, he wasn't going to be guided by ideology. He was going to be guided by what worked. And so what did he tell his farmers? Grow what you want to grow. Do what you want to do. He unleashed them. And as a result of that, that was the beginning of China's resurgence as an economic power. And then he did a lot of other things. But that was the key thing. And China is not a democratic country, never has been. But Mao had done a good thing in the revolution, and they had land reform. And so farmers had control over some land. But the government was dictating to them what they do in terms of farming. But under Deng Xiaoping, they let them cut loose. They gave them the freedom to develop. And I'm not saying we go the way of China, but I'm saying that that's a principal thing. You have to have trust in the people who are the basis of your economy.
From what you're saying, if I look at those facts, it seems like Africans after the independence had the autonomy to decide what kind of model. But so the question is, like, it was the decision that was made depending on the leadership at that moment, because what we know is that the colonialists, or they never left. They still had their hands in the decisions being made by those leaders. But what you're telling us is, like, they had the autonomy to decide what kind of economies, what kind of systems they want to build for themselves. But why didn't they just go back to the system before colonialism?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there were external forces that Africa had to deal with. And in the case of Nkrumah, he was overthrown because the external forces didn't like him. The U.S., Israel, and others overthrew him. In the case of Sekou Touré, he was facing invasions. And even though Nyerere got financial support from Swedish companies, he had a lot of opposition from external forces. So Africa, it wasn't a free ride. Africa had the external forces giving them trouble. But at the same time, Africa also, under creative leadership, had the ability to combat those forces and do something for their people. It wouldn't be easy, but they had those opportunities. And so in the case of Nkrumah, he succeeded in building education, healthcare, roads, and electricity. He did that, you know, and he got some external financing. When he came into power, he had over 500 million pounds, which was a lot of money for an African country coming up at independence, even though the British had taken most of it. And he had skilled people. But part of the problem with Africa was, if we're going to look at why Ghana ended up way behind South Korea, there was an interesting meeting that occurred between Kwame Nkrumah and the person that headed up Singapore. And Singapore now is known as a great industrial city, a great technological city. And this was a problem that he noted. He was having a conversation with Kwame Nkrumah. By the way, I like Nkrumah, so don't get it wrong that I'm saying that he was no good. He was one of the best leaders Africa had. I'm also pointing out the weaknesses. And
Sure, of course, which is very relevant. Because
so
most of the time when we talk about these leaders, it's like they never had any weaknesses. And I
yeah,
think we're also going to do a show on what are the mistakes that most of these leaders also made. Even Garvey, what were their shortcomings? Not always thinking that everything was fine.
exactly. Yeah, so they were having a conversation in Nkrumah with the person who really built up the Singapore economy. Now, at that time, they were at the same level. This was a meeting in the 50s. And Nkrumah made a comment. And the comment was he was praising one of his ministers for his mastery of Shakespeare. And the man who built up Singapore, who would turn it into a giant of economic power, said, I don't see what the relevance of that is. In other words, what the hell does Shakespeare have to do with building up Africa? And so in that metaphor is the problem. As great as Nkrumah was, and as great as some of our African leaders were, with a few exceptions, their westernization, while there were strengths in it, there were weaknesses. And Nkrumah majored in religion and economics. Religion's the last thing that an African leader needs to be studying. It's your own private business, whatever your religion is. But his middle name was Francis. He was a Christian. What does Africa need with that? Nkrumah was a part of a study group with John Henry Clark in Harlem, and they would often joke with him and say, Kwame, Africa doesn't need any preachers. Africa needs engineers and scientists, and Nkrumah would laugh. But Nkrumah also majored in economics. So that was relevant. But the key point is he had been away a long time in the West, in the United States, and he was working hard. He was a poor person, and that was good in the sense that it kept him in touch with everyday Black people. His girlfriends in the United States were Black. He lived in Black communities. He preached in Black churches. So that was good. He learned Pan-Africanism really in the United States and from Padmore and others. So that was good. But he'd been westernized too long and didn't have the confidence in his rural farmers and in their knowledge. But generally, African leaders didn't have the confidence in, because they had been miseducated in the Western system and Western culture, in their models for running society. They did not have confidence in it. And so they inherited models they didn't even understand. These nation states you have in Africa, most Africans at village level don't know what they are. They just know they're being taxed. Armies are coming in, police are coming in, all kinds of graft and corruption is going on. They don't understand it, because it's like having a head that's one thing and a body that's something else. It's like the head is grafted onto the body. And so that's the legacy of slavery and colonialism. So you can't just blame this on African leaders. This is also the product of us being hit by a couple of hundred years of enslavement and then colonialism. So these are things we have to overcome, but we have to go back, or in rap, they say black to the future. You got to go back to your past to go forward. You got to make your past serve your present. You got to look at what's the strengths in what you have and draw from it and discard the negatives. We have to do the same thing in the United States or wherever we are in the world and draw from the best of it and use common sense, because in the end, everything is about being practical, using common sense. So it's a lot of things. So I'm not just saying that the leaders just had a leeway to do anything they wanted, but through creativity, they could have done a lot better.
Correct.
And some did. Nyerere did some basically good things, though he made mistakes. His Ujamaa model, and I pointed out, I worked in those villages in 73 and then studied them. It was really the foundation for what Africans needed to do. He was going to agricultural development first, and he was using a communal model, Ujamaa. as his model. And he was trying to decentralize everything so that people in the villages had healthcare, had education, had good housing. And he had a number of successful Ujamaa villages. But he was in part frustrated by that state, that European nation state. And it was the people around him who he thought he needed, who were the few Western educated Africans. I pointed this out in the last show. I met Nyerere in 1977, and he pointed out he wanted to prove that Africans could run their own society. So he made a point of getting the few college educated Africans to be a part of his party. And so they were helping running the country, but they had a mentality of contempt for their people. Nyerere did not. He was raised in the villages. He was a village man. And in fact, he didn't care about wealth or anything, but he did say Tanzania is me. And that's not good. That, you know, the government was made up of Nyerere. And it really wasn't, because he needed the people around him. And those people around him, this educated African elite, frustrated his project because they did not trust the Africans who are the real economists, the agriculturalists, the everyday people. They didn't trust them. And so that is the big problem. So even with a Nyerere who stepped down, he didn't stay in power forever, who was an honest man, humble, but no fool. But still, he did not realize the trap he was in. He didn't realize that European nation state was a trap. A interview that was held with him and a guy named Bill Sutherland. Bill Sutherland was the highest ranking African American in Tanzania. I knew him. And in 1984, when I was in Tanzania, I heard how the villages had fallen apart. Bill Sutherland interviewed Nyerere a few years before he died. And he asked him, did he realize that the European nation state model was a problem? Nyerere's answer was he never thought about it, which meant to me that he still didn't see that as a problem. He saw corruption. He saw his elite that frustrated him. He saw outside forces that were against him. But he did not see that the way of governance from the top, the nation state, at the president's level, that system that comes out of Europe that I talked about before, that system is at the heart of the biggest problems, and then all the other things that happen with colonialism. So I'm saying that African leaders, if they're creative, but the key thing is if they're de-brainwashed, and Nyerere was largely de-brainwashed. I mean, he was a Catholic. I mean, you know, that's what happens with colonialism. But he had lived in the village long enough to respect his people, you know, and to respect the culture. So he was ahead of where most Africans leaders were at. But what I'd say is that for most African leaders, you need what Cabral referred to, and what I practice in my organizing is a return to the source. And that means de-brainwashing the people before they come into any kind of leadership. De-brainwashing.
It is almost impossible from what we've been, I mean, from the lectures and conversations we've been holding, it seems like it's really almost impossible for a leader in Africa who has no knowledge of the Western systems and ideologies and ways of even doing business to rule Africa, particularly when we still have them there. So like we always looking like scholars and advisors, no matter what you do. I take it an example. I grew up also, I'm a village girl and grew up and came to Europe. I mean, I would have also been in that model, in that perspective, if I never knew and understand the European or the Western system. Is it really, could this Africa be authentically ruled by Africans that have no idea of both? And then, but the ones like the Nkwames and the others that have this westernized system, how do they find the balance, like the diaspora as well?
I'll give you an example coming from another people, because one of my specialties is Mexican history. So I give you an example of the Mexican Revolution and then make a point here about your question. In the turn of the 20th century, the Mexicans had a revolution. It was a serious revolution. It was 10 years long. And one of their greatest leaders was a man named Emiliano Zapata. You can't see it, but behind my desk, I have a picture of him. His grandmother was African, dark complexion. Mexican is a mixture of African, Indian, and Spanish. So they had a revolution in Mexico. And Zapata, who came from the village, couldn't read and write. He began to learn to read and write later. He came from the South, and then you had a man named Pancho Villa, who came from the North. He had been a bandit, but had become a revolutionary leader, and a good one. They end up seizing Mexico City. Mexico City is the capital. So that is power. And literally, they had control of Mexico. But they left Mexico City. Now, Zapata had a vision. He was like what you referred to yourself, coming out of the village. He came out of the rural areas of Mexico, and his vision was communalism. The land should be shared. And that is the one thing the Mexicans gained until Bill Clinton came along with NAFTA and killed it. The Mexicans had a share in their land. But the reason he left the capital is, I don't think that he had the confidence, number one, that he could run the country, but he didn't really appreciate what was involved in running a country. So he had the vision. He could have run it quite well. But when he left, the technocrats came in. These were Western educated, largely white Mexicans, elites who hated their people. And they've been grounding Mexico into the dust ever since then. So your point, I use the Mexican Revolution as a point of your point that no, you need to know this modern world, and you need to know how the economies work on a global level, and you need to know science, you need to know technology, you need to know all of these things. But what you also need to know is yourself. Now, I'll give myself as an example. When I was in the Black Freedom Movement in the 60s, I've been in the movement for 3 years. I became chair of Congress of Racial Equality. I had 10,000 people at the peak taking on the economic power structure. But I was having lunch at a restaurant called Virginia's Restaurant. It was a restaurant in the Fillmore, the Black community. It was the base of our movement, one of the large Black communities in California. And the woman that owned it fed us 2 free meals a day, because I was an organizer for 9 years, no pay. And so literally my food came from my people. And I'm in law school. I had graduated from the university, and I'm having lunch. And my lunch is with my vice chair, a brother named Norman Brown, who's still a good friend of mine. He's a couple of years older than me. He was a cab driver. Came out of the same town that Zora Neale Hurston came from, the first all-Black town organized by Blacks in the United States. I was leading a movement, and I had come out of a community that had been all white. I was born in the Fillmore Black community for 7 years, but then I lived in a white community. I'd gone through 4 years of university. I was in my 2nd year of law school. And I'm having a conversation, and for the first time in my life, Norman is showing me how the government really works. I had realized my mind was on remote control. I thought I was in a democracy. I thought that the way they said this system worked was the way it worked. But I was fighting corporations and understanding a different thing. So when Norman explained to me that corporations run the country, I underwent an awakening. And when I underwent that awakening, it caused me to realize 2 things. I didn't know myself. I didn't know my enemy. It also led me to realize I had been miseducated. I felt like a fool. So I underwent a re-education. That re-education you'll see in the back, a person with sunglasses on, that's Amilcar Cabral, the greatest leader in the 20th century. He underwent the same re-education. He said in Portugal, we decided to become African because he came from Cape Verde. He was born in Guinea-Bissau, but his people were of Cape Verdean ancestry, and Cape Verdeans were mixed up with Portuguese, and so they had assimilated mindsets. So when he went to Portugal, he didn't see himself as an African. He had to be reborn through what I call the sixfold stages of mental freedom. It's a system. I'm a systems person, so I have systems. And so I underwent this awakening. The university wasn't my classroom. Marcus Bookstore was the bookstore, but the battlefield was the classroom. My teachers were masters. And so Marcus Garvey became my first master. Malcolm X became my second master. I became like them. And so I underwent a re-education process. So if we're in this modern world, this Western world, and we're going through a Western education, if we don't undergo a re-education, then while we may have some knowledge that Africa needs, our minds are so messed up, we won't know how to apply them so they will be useful to our people. So we have to go, those of us who have been brainwashed. Some of us come out of intact cultures, we're solid in our identity, and all we need is extra skills to use. But for those of us who are not, we have to undergo a rebirth, a transformation. And if that doesn't happen with those leaders will be useless. So in the case of Emiliano Zapata, he had the rebirth. He lacked confidence in his skills to run a country. He was learning how to read and write, but he lacked the confidence. So that was his problem. But in other cases, our problem is we may have the skills, but we may not have the foundation, the grounding in our own culture to know ourselves and to love ourselves and respect ourselves. And you cannot love your people unless you love yourself. So that transformation is real key. Groups like the Black Panther Party in the United States lack that transformational model. Assata Shakur, who was a member of the Black Panther Party, who's now in exile in Cuba, a beautiful sister, she said in the Black Panther Party, we knew more about Mao and Marx than we did about Harriet Tubman or our own history, you know? And the Panthers were a strong group. And those that were really good, they did know something. Assata Shakur did, but a lot of them didn't. And so the culture is really like the key. And, these skills that we need, remember, I mean, if we're talking about mathematics, the Kemites gave birth to the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras learned the Pythagorean theorem in the Kemetic mystery systems. We gave birth to medicine, we gave birth to geometry. It's not like it's something that is in the modern world alone. We high tech. Ancient Kemet was a high tech civilization for its time, the greatest in the history of the world. So modernization should not mean Westernization. And for too many of us, that's what it's meant. And so too many African leaders saw modernization as industrialization. They frowned on agriculture. Big mistake. You can't build an industrial base without an ability to feed your people. That's your agriculture. And that's the foundation for everything. And you cannot agree to any agreement that comes from the West that restricts you in what your farmers can grow. Structural adjustment said that the economies of Africa that went under structural adjustment, that they had to grow certain crops for export. That was the same thing that colonialism did. You didn't have to go for that, and then put people in a position where they're producing for export, but not producing enough food to feed themselves.
Correct.
You make decisions based on the interests of your people. And that means you have to have some integrity. So that this de-brainwashing, which is, by the way, it's a system. And Dr. Obertashaka's show, I go through this, but in organizing, that's what I do. In organizing, I take people through transformation. And so I have people that have been with me 40, 50 years, and then new people coming in. But they have undergone a transformation. And because of that, they know themselves, they love themselves, they can think for themselves and their people. They have been useful to their people and to humanity. So, I mean, that is the crucial thing. You're not going to get in any university. There's not going to be a course on how to free your mind.
Correct.
There's no such course. Forget it. It comes from us. You know? It comes from free minds to free minds.
To free Mansons. Okay. Dr. T. Shaka, Dr. Oba T. Shaka. I mean, for those of you that are wondering, why is it that we're not having King Bongane here today, which was previously announced yesterday? I think it was a miscommunication from the flyer. King Bongane III is going to be with us tomorrow. Yes, his program was for tomorrow, but I miscommunicated it. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that misunderstanding. Yes, today actually was for Dr. Oba T. Shaka. And yeah, so tomorrow we're going to listen to him and get his point of view. But I'm coming back to you, Dr. Oba. You said something that is very important, that you have for more than 50 years on the Dr. Oba T. Shaka show, train people. I see, of course, you do a lot of workshops on your shows and actually walk them through. Now, wouldn't this be a perfect how would I say, solution for Africans' leadership, like building the leadership? They have to undergo this transformation process. Now, we can talk about the ones that are existing. We're talking about we're building the Africa for tomorrow. So wouldn't that be a solution? Because I was about to ask, shouldn't there be an African Leadership Institute? We have Cultural Institute, we have history, universities that are talking about politics, economic, or whatever, but we don't have a center to train the leaders of Africa from this double perspective. What would be your take on that?
Yeah, you're a typical sister. You think on your feet. First of all, the Dr. Obertashaka show's only been on for 4 months, so this is a new show. But I've been doing this for 61 years, and organizing is doing the transformation. And by the way, I have a leadership academy. It's called Prof, which is the highest university in ancient Kemet. And I'll send you a copy of this. It has a curriculum and stuff. Prof, Amilcar Cabral, which is the person you see behind me with the sunglasses on, greatest leader in the 20th century, Ella Baker Leadership University. And so this is a training thing. I'm going to be using the internet for purposes of doing this. We do this in the community, training. And so, and Dr. Obenga helped me with some of the things on the Kemetic part of this training. While he was at State, he helped me in terms of formulating some things on the ancient Kemetic ideas about leadership training. But the foundation of this system is what I call the sixfold stages to mental freedom. They're the stages that people go through when they're waking up. And so the Dr. Obertashaka show is grounded in laying the foundation for that, but everything I do is grounded in doing that. And so leadership training without that is teaching technique, but you're going to be doing it the same way that anyone else does. So you have to have a transformation of your philosophy. You have to have a transformation of your attitudes, your thought pattern, your communication pattern, and your behavior pattern. If you've been trained in a Western model that's arrogant, that thinks that people don't know anything, that only a few people do, that's called elitism, then you have to undergo a transformation. Or if you have doubts about your own abilities because you think that Africans are backward or Black people are backward, you have to have a transformation,
Mm-hmm.
of your attitudes. Or if you don't like Africans, you know what I mean? You have to have a real rebirth and transformation. So it's on different levels depending on where people are at. And so, yeah, so we have leadership training that deals with one, defining what leaders are and how they work and skills and stuff. But the foundation is a transformation of consciousness, and that's an immersion process. That's a walk and talk and do process, not an informational process. It's not something where you're just quoting information. It's about transforming your being to go to a higher level. And so that's what's crucial. And we need it all over the world.
All over. I mean, yes, it's 4 months old, the Dr. Obati Shaka show, but please, hey, what would you advise me to do? I'm looking forward to organize seminars with these African leaders and the would-to-be leaders on such seminars. Do you think it's a good idea? I want to try, organize it with all these 55 African leaders, to just get a session of training. Are they too over knowledgeable to take a training or workshop?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. And pull in people, draw from the different skills. I know you know how to do that. And you have to look at people where they are. So people are at different levels when it comes to consciousness. And so transformational systems of transforming consciousness, so we develop deep self-love, deep self-knowledge, and deep self-respect, is geared to where a person's at. So whatever you're doing in training, you got to figure out where people's heads are at and then gear your training to that level. And there are people, young people and older people, who are very conscious and very aware. And those are people that should lead this kind of thing, because unless you practice what you preach, then it's not worth preaching it. And then you can get into skill development. So many of our members, and I have a group that I chair called Pan-African People's Organization. Before I set this show up, we discussed, do we think it's possible to do this kind of leadership training on Facebook, YouTube, the internet? And we said, yeah, because you have time in your favor. So it's a matter of how much time people are prepared to put into this. In the United States, we want to run these in prisons. We don't do that now, but we like to, because people have time on their hands. It'll be harder in prison because you have prison guards, but it'll be easier because people have time.
Thank
and
you.
People who want to use their time appropriately can. So it's an immersion. The key thing is getting your thoughts, your words, and your actions work together consistently, based on truth, based on justice. And that's an internalization process. So you need to draw from your history to be able to do that. You need to draw from your culture to be able to do that. It's a process I call internalizing. In other words, you have to take what's outside, and it's like food. You're digesting it, and your system is discarding those things that it doesn't need, and it's digesting what it does need. And that's basically what happens in a transformational process.
Okay. We are 1 hour into this show. Very soon I'll be opening up the lines to take some few calls and questions. If any of you have a question directly for Dr. Obati Shaka, but it also would be necessary for you to understand that this experts and callers don't just come here to have conversation with us. As from every indication, they have strategic and authentic solutions to our problems, to Africa's problems in general. Yeah, so on that note, I want to break out the good news. I know most of you have been watching, or you just saw it dropped from our media press release, that we are officially launching the AfroWorld.tv next weekend. Now, what is it all about? It's exactly what you're talking about, Dr. Obati Shaka. We thought of creating a website, and we also had the mandatory from Africans worldwide, or particularly Pan-African Daily TV fans, last year to do a kind of a platform that would serve Africans on the continent and also in the diaspora. And as we started with as we started the first one, this is the invitation. Put the first order flyer. As we started with this project, there are a lot of information that was we need to do just a social media platform. Do we need to do and we've been working on that process for more close to 6-7 months now, but it is ready now for launch. And so we came into a conclusion that this web site has to include everything, because we actually thought about what you're talking about. How do we connect to prisoners who cannot sit in a classroom? How do we connect to those even in the villages? But we know that the digital system or the world is digitalized now. So even my grandmother has a phone. So yes, he might not listen to lectures, but I mean, they can connect to us wherever we are. And that's how we came now to transform the AfroWorld.tv website into a networking space for Pan-Africans and Africans worldwide with a massive e-commerce. Because we don't just want to talk or meet and socialize. We want to do business. We want to network. We want to educate ourselves. And so the AfroWorld.tv, I am absolutely humble and proud to announce this official big launch, which is coming on next week. It's going to be a 3-day event, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with all these great speakers. And like a solution to what Dr. Obatishaka is talking about, giving this transformation seminars and workshops and trainings is going to be done on the AfroWorld.tv platform. Why? Because exactly this questions was taken into consideration. How are we going to safeguard our information? So now if we're doing it on every other platform and we want to transform, and we also know that the systems that actually are really working against us, let's not lie to ourselves. Let's be honest and face the fact. So they're going to be critical informations that would only be available on AfroWorld.tv, like such transformational internal leadership issues, our culture, our history, our media, our politics and news. It's a complete website. It's like a website, but it is massive and it can accommodate, the 1.7 or 500, 1.500 million Africans worldwide. And so we are very excited to get this launched. The 3 days would be experts from every angle, business experts, financial advisors on how we can utilize this space to make money, to trade amongst us, to put all our initiatives in one pot. Of course, I understand that we're having a lot of existing platforms with different concepts and models, but the AfroWorld.tv is a combination of really focusing on solutions. It's not about we just meeting and posting pictures and how we look good or talk about being that. No, it is really what we've been doing on the Pan-African Daily TV. We have challenges that we need to address with strategic solutions. For instance, like we were talking about, why not give a leadership training to existing leaders of Africa? Why do we spend our whole time and energy talking about the bad leadership, the governance, the interference? Now we have all these scholars and experts. It is time now that we all know that we need to relearn. Like he's saying, we need to black into the future. So we need to transform ourselves and get a rebate. We need to rebaptize and surface in our Africanness. We all know that we have wandered, whether we like it or not. We just look black, most of us, but our internal system have been they've been so infested that we cannot disagree about that. Yeah, so we need not just a healing, but we need a transformation of our psyche, even our children. We look at them and we're thinking that we're raising, but we're just raising it for the systems out there. So the AfroWorld.tv is that one spot where we just don't talk, but we want to make money for Africa. Yes, we have to sell. Africans are so creative, particularly the young talents and the women, like you were saying, have made amazing projects that, I can't even be bringing every one of them here. And that was the reason why we were just quiet, working in the background, trying to put this new Africa structure out there that it's not just going to be, it's going to be the biggest e-commerce, the marketplace, news and politics, history, culture, whatever we want. So bloggers on Pan-Africanism, on the One Africa, you can create your account there. Marketers, business experts, everything is available. And they are also calls to calls. So like the engineers try to put every piece of what we have here. If it is a piece of WhatsApp, you find it on the Afro World. If it is a piece of, free calls, you can call the whole world from the Afro World, the TV, video calls, negotiate your business, ship your products to all your customers and whatever. Yes, that's what we've been able to do. And we're looking forward to this launch next week. And yes, so you have the official invitation letter that is change the flyer. This is the official flyer, the official launching, and we say the slogan is Africa is ready. Because most of the time we keep talking, we keep saying we're talking too much. Yes, we have to do the talking, but we're walking in the background, as you can see. I mean, when we will be sitting on this platform and all the participants would be giving even tutorials on how to use this massive space, I mean, you'll be amazed that we Africans, we don't just only talk. Yes, we talk and we do the work. So we are so proud. That's the invitation to all Africans. Please make sure you download these flyers. We are sharing it into the group. Paste it on your social media. Invite every African, particularly Pan-African, that have the need for unity, for uniting us worldwide. That is our focus. We're just not interested in Africans that are still worshiping foreign systems. That is not good enough. We are saying conscious Africans are the ones to enjoy from this platform. We're not just going to be happy about people that are just coming and we have thousands of people on the platform. No, we're going to be very selective and we want conscious Africans, because even though some Africans are awake, most of the ones that still infiltrate and distract are the ones that are unconscious. So we start being careful and selective and know what kind of African and Africans that we want to build for our future. So that was just a point of it. Like I said, please make sure you take this poster. If you are really that kind of a Pan-African, like we're saying, and you have the spirit of unity and to build the African that we want, you pick up a flyer like this. I don't even need to remind you. You just post it in all your networks and invite one another to be on board. Remember, it is not for anyone that you're doing it. You're just doing it for yourself. You're just doing it for your pride. You're doing it for your race. You're doing it for your people. You're doing it for your children. So never think that because it's posted on the Pan-African Daily TV, if I'm another social media platform, I'm not supposed to post it. That attitude has to stop. We've listened a lot to that and we keep doing the same thing. Let us promote everything that we see is okay. The Pan-African Daily TV has been open to all initiatives. We give space here. Social platforms also that are existing have a space here and we're still hosting them. So it's not about that. It's about how we unite and promote and support the Africa that we want to see for our generations. And then we can sit back and relax in our old age and said, yes, we did it. So thank you for that short announcement. Like I said, yes, this is going to be happening next week. And we also look forward to have Dr. Oba T. Shakar as one of the speakers on this forum. And he's actually going to be telling us on these trainings that we'll be sharing on the AfroWorld.tv. But of course, you know that you can follow him on his daily show. So I would like to bring him back to the studio to ask, when are you available on your shows? How can we follow you? Are there workshops that are bookable? Do we need to, is there fees? How do they book? How do they follow you? How do we get these trainings? Over to you, Dr. Obati Shaka.
Yeah, first I want to say that what you're doing is brilliant, innovative and necessary. And I know you've given a lot of thought to this. I know it's going to work. So very good. In terms of my show, the Dr. Obata Shaka show comes on every Saturday, West Coast or Pacific time, 10 a.m. in the morning, but you go to our platform and you can get all of our shows. And we have a show this Saturday that will be on the assassination of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was assassinated February 21st, 1965. And I have on my show the foremost expert on the assassination of Malcolm X, Professor Baba Zak Kondo. And he wrote a book called Unraveling the Assassination of Malcolm X. And so that show will be coming on this Saturday. The way you reach us is, and I think Sister Tata is going to have this address posted.
I already did. But I just want to say something. It might be possible that we can also stream it on the Pan-African Daily. Like we can share the show and people can also follow from here if they're accessible on your platform. But of course, we shared the link. Can you just share the link again?
Yeah, http bit.ly/DROBASHOW.
Yes, the link is available. Yeah.
That's the internet.
Good.
Now, in terms of leadership, we will be announcing shortly some programs for leadership training. Right now, we're doing a number of different things on different topics, and we've covered the victory that Blacks led in defeating Trump, and we have covered two shows, one on Black families in the U.S. and what has hit Black families since 1968, and then the last one, African families on the continent, what's hit African families since 1960. And these are the two most recent shows. And we've done a host of other things on self-defense movements that Blacks have carried out historically in the United States, especially during the 60s. And you know, we've looked at our culture. There's one called The Spiritual Blues. We're looking at African American history and African history, and there'll be a series of things on African history that we'll be covering shortly, and a series of things on African culture that we'll be covering shortly. So we often live feed so people can make comments. This show on the assassination of Malcolm, it will not be a live show because I'm taping that show right after this show, and it'll be posted on Saturday. So people at 10 on, they'll be able to see that.
Okay. Absolutely. Yes. The workshops, how does it function? Like you also give, do you also intend to plan something like workshops where people can book and register on webinars, like the workshops and the trainings?
Yeah, we're going to have webinars. There is a free one that's up that deals with an introduction to the six-fold stages to mental freedom. But we'll have a webinar that will, leadership training classes will go for an average of 12 weeks, and we'll be doing systematic training. But the key thing will be the transformation of consciousness, and that will be the first level of training. And then around that, leadership skills and history. But the transformation of consciousness will be the key thing, which is usually missed with leadership training. And there are stages in that, and we'll be taking people through those stages. Some of the shows that I've done introduce people to that. So I've been, because it's like the foundation for the show. So yes, we will be announcing that. We haven't started it yet because we're building this show. So as we build the show, then that's one of the first things we're going to be doing is leadership training.
I'm very happy it hasn't started because I mean I'll also be one of the participants of that. Yes, and we would be announcing that show and asking, because that's the key point. Because even us, most of us that are viewing or following, yeah, we just get it. But to get a training is more than just having a dialogue. It's more than just conversing, holding a conversation. You know, I mean, I always try to make us understand that sitting in a class and listening to something, I get the knowledge. But having a conversation like this, we discuss, we can disagree, and we can think further. But if I'm trained to think differently. It's absolutely different. So yes, I urge all of us, you've heard it, transformation of consciousness is coming up on the Dr. Obatisha show. And in as much as we have that information, we'll be sharing it with all of you to join it. I am already part of it, and I know all of you, we have to be on the same level. If we don't get these trainings, we would misunderstand ourselves. We need to clean all the systems and all these toxics to be able to build the Africa in our lives, and particularly also our families, in a more sustainable and a healthy, functional way. So,
one good thing about YouTube or Facebook or any of these platforms is you can actually break people down into groups, and you can get people to interact. And so there are a lot of things that will enable you to do some different type of training than is normally done in the lecture model, where somebody's just coming up and talking to you. That's crucial. And then the key thing is, what do you do with what you learn? You have to apply it to your community, apply it to your families, wherever you are. And that's going to be the key part of this.
Yeah, so you're going to do some kind of like, there's going to be an oral workshop, and then the trainings, like some kind of vocational, a simulation groups and case studies.
Yeah, there'll be interactions, but the first level is transformation. So people are going to understand the stages that we go through in consciousness. And so, for example, why is Africa in so much trouble? Too many of the leaders were at a certain stage of consciousness. What was that? Assimilation. Their Western education had assimilated them to, on the outside, to look African, but to think white, think European. So, but everyone's not at that stage. So it's identifying the stage that people are at, and then working on that, and then taking people to the next stage. And it's going to be a system where people interact, dialogue, discuss where they're at, but then also take what you learn and apply it in your life, apply it in your community, apply it in the organizations that you're in. And so that's where leadership skills come in. Because if it's just the normal internet where you're just talking about skills out of context, it's not going to work. People have to be using this to improve the lives of their people, their family, their communities. If they live in a village, their villages, wherever it is, applying it. And so that's what this is going to be geared to, practical ways to use this to improve your life. And economic development, what I like about what you're doing is economic development is real key, because getting us out of poverty and ways in which we can do that, that's really important. So that will be a key part of that as well.
Yeah, some viewers are also asking, would it also, what about the spirituality? I mean, we also know that that's also some of your focus. Would they also be trainings on that? I mean, in the future, not just like you said, we're starting with that.
Yeah, I'm as a scholar, I'm a historian. I'm into politics, and I'm into philosophy. Philosophy is my first love, African and African American philosophy, and that's spirituality. African philosophy is the deep thought of our culture, and Europeans call it philosophy. The Dogon call it deep knowledge. Jacob Carruthers, who I studied under, who was a good friend of Dr. Theophile Obenga, who was also a master on ancient Kemet, he called it deep thought. And so the deepest stuff that we draw from in our culture comes from what we call spirituality. Now, you should note, there is no word for religion in any African language. There's no word for spirituality in any African language. Religion, because our systems are not religions. Religions, whether it's Judaism, Islam, or Christianity, and if that's what people are into, it's fine. But those are religions that have systems of prophets, they have Bibles, they have rules. and those are usually their moral code. African systems are spirit systems, and these spirit systems do not have prophets, and they do not need to have commandments, even though in ancient Kemet you had the 42 confessions of innocence. Thou shalt not steal, or really wasn't thou shalt not steal, but when you passed before the assessors, when you died, your spirit was judged. And so there was an assessor that checked you out on adultery, and you're supposed to be able to plead, I did not commit adultery, or lying. I'm not a liar. Now, you know, nobody's getting past that one completely. Murder, I did not kill, and all of this. But those are like not commandments. Those are moral statements that your soul, in this case in ancient Kemet, the Ka, which is your vital force, which is also called your double. In ancient Kemet, the picture of a Ka was two upraised hands. And what it symbolized was you and your spirit double. And they believed, and people who are spiritually gifted actually say you can see that everyone has an identical spirit twin. That's your guide. Looks just like you. In ancient Kemet, when you saw a drawing of a Ka, the only difference between that and the person is that the color of the hair was gray. If it was a male, if it was the pharaoh, he had a pharaoh's beard that represented the deceased pharaoh. But in every other way, it looks just like the person. The difference is that spirit, which is your life force, has no illness. It's a spirit. It is the force of you. So when you pass on to the other side, that is what testifies for you at judgment, because it is the memory of everything that you've done in your life. It is also your destiny. So the Yoruba, I'm into Ifa, the Yoruba system. These crowns that you see, my Babalao had those crowns made for me in Yoruba country. But the Yoruba call destiny Ori. And they say, this is what you picked in heaven in the presence of God. You picked your life. You picked your gifts. You picked your trials. You picked your parents. You picked your time of birth. And then you forget it. And the purpose in life is to remember your destiny. You may not remember the compact you made in the presence of God, but it is for you to remember the path that you decided to choose in heaven. And so that's a part of spirit. And so in your life, things will happen, and you often have to listen to your spirit. Is this something I should do? You know, for me in 1961, my mother's best friend told me to join a group called CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. I didn't know what it was. I went to the meeting and I joined the group, and it was a door that was opening, the door to the freedom movement. And so I had to listen to myself, and myself said, I don't really know what all of this is about, but I'm going to get in it, you know? And so in life, doors open at certain points. Those are destiny doors. And so the question is, what do you do when those doors open? And even if you make the wrong choice, there may be another time to make the right choice. But the point is, I believe this is true. In fact, I know this is true. I have enough evidence to know that this is true, that as you think, so you are. Because thoughts are power. And if you think you can't do something, you won't do it. And if you think you can, you probably will, you know? And basically, our life is a series of thoughts. We attract what we think. A lot of us in relationships. In the States, we have a lot of sisters and brothers who think they're just no good men out there. They're just no good women out there. And what ends up happening? They end up getting no good men or women because they think that they are no good. And then they say, see, it's proof that there are no good people there. But if you have an idea of what you want in a relationship and you begin to think about that, you will attract that. So that's a part of spirit. That's a part of spirituality. So yeah, that's at the core of everything. You know, just in terms of African development, African farmers have some of the greatest agricultural gifts in the world. And one of them is that they're not only good at planting things and growing things, but they also understand that everything that God creates has spirit in it.
Mm-hmm.
They understand that everything around them is a part of this spirit world. And so a lot of their ability in agriculture has to do with the fact that they know certain crops, certain plants. They know when to plant them, how to plant them. But they also know that there's spirits in those plants. The greatest scientist in the world in the 20th century was a man named George Washington Carver. He was a botanist. He was gifted with the ability to heal plants. He said no plant that he ever took died. He always cured plants. He went to the greatest agricultural college in the United States, but he was already a gifted botanist. And he was also trained in chemistry and trained in physics and all the rest of this. But the key thing is, he would go into the forest at 4 a.m. and he said the plants talked to him. He would listen to the healing properties of plants. I was in Ghana in the late 80s, and I ran into a brother in Ghana, and he was telling me there's going to be a lecture at the University of Accra on this same thing, on farmers who communicate with plants. Well, all over the world, people of color do this, but in the West, spirit is taken out of everything. My best thoughts come from piping into God's mind. So that comes through communicating with God. And that's where all breakthroughs in anything come from. Einstein's theory of relativity came from knowing quantum physics, but having an intuitional dream where he saw himself riding light. And then later, he had an intuitional breakthrough, and that was the theory of relativity. George Washington Carver had these all the time. That's why he was the greatest scientist in the world, and Einstein may have been the second greatest, because he was constantly making scientific breakthroughs. So we have to trust the spirit that's within us and combine that with whatever we know. But when you pipe into God's mind, then you're piping into the highest mind. And that's a part of what Africa has the strongest legacy of. We're a spirit people. So I say, now we're facing global warming. The planet will be uninhabitable by the end of this century unless we stop this global warming. But the cause of global warming is the philosophy of Western science, not science. It's a philosophy. And that philosophy says man and woman are separate from nature. And so the goal of science is to control nature. Francis Bacon is the author of this. He had what he called empirical science, where you observe nature. There's nothing wrong with observing nature. But the reason for observing nature was what? To control nature and to create a new nature. You know? And that's what you have with Western science now, a war on nature. And that war on nature through fossil fuels and everything else is heating the planet up. Right now, Texas has been going through a tremendous storm, and people have been without heat. Their pipes are leaking and everything else, because global warming doesn't just lead to the warming of the planet, it also leads to extremes in weather. And so it's not enough for us to have scientists. We need to have scientists that are grounded in our worldview. And I call this a spirit science, where you see there's no separation between human beings and nature. We are one. And our goal in nature is to be a guardian of nature, not a controller of nature, the way George Washington Carver was, to be a healer of nature and to learn from nature, not to be someone that goes in and controls it. So Monsanto's comes in with these genetically modified seeds. These seeds, once they're put in the ground, you can no longer put a normal seed in the ground. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't reproduce itself, so you have to buy seeds from Monsanto's. That's creating a new nature. And there's been no real studies, as far as I know, on the damage that's done to any crop that can't reproduce itself. In the States, you don't even know which crops are genetically modified. You only know, like, if you get an orange and there's no seed, a grape and there's no seed. If anything in nature can't reproduce itself as a species, there's got to be something wrong with it.
Correct.
And if the only way you can get a seed is to buy it, that's a gift of nature. Then if you can't afford to buy a seed and you got Africans living on $1 or $2 a day, then that's guaranteed starvation. So spirit is at the heart of everything. Spirit. And more than anything, as a scholar, I'm a spirit scholar warrior, not a spiritual, a spirit scholar warrior. When I say I've seen the light, when I see the light, that's where my best thought comes from. Mm-hmm. And I've been thankful that God's been kind enough to share some wisdom with me. So I'm not going to run around and say I'm so smart to get this on my own. So yes, spirit, what we call spirituality, spirit is at the heart of everything that we do. It should be, because the African people are spirit-based people.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, thank you so much. I think we've actually exhausted, and the lines are open for questions. I will take 1 or 2 questions and then we're done for today. But I keep seeing in the chat people asking, do you know Yoruba bin Waha? That's a question from Kofi.
No, I don't. My Babalawo is a Babalawo named Ifeyemi, who is a Araba in the Yoruba system. He lives in Ishogbo, Nigeria. But no, I don't know that particular person. But I've been in the Yoruba system for over 40 years, and it's a good system. Though I study a lot of African systems, but this system, I have a priest, and my priest has been very helpful in my life.
Okay, good. So, Prof, hey, yeah, I just want to remind the viewers again of the Obati Shaka show that is coming up on Saturday, 10 a.m. You said that?
Yeah, 10 a.m. Pacific Coast time.
Pacific Coast time, 10 a.m. I'll have to see what time we have on the different schedules, and we will post it out there. Is there a flyer on it, or you would still send, or is just?
Yeah, in fact, I sent you a flyer, and the flyer is on our show that's coming up this Saturday, and so
okay,
you can post it.
All right, so we can post it again. Yeah,
and you can go to the site anytime you want to. Shows are up.
All right, good. Wow, it's been a wonderful time spending this almost 2 hours with you, Dr. T. Shaka. And yes, we've learned a lot, we've enjoyed a lot, and we're thanking you so much for your energy. And do you really have time to rest? Let me just ask, because you're so busy and so active. The strength and the power, I think we need to know the recipe, please. Let us know how to stay strong and add some maybe additional bonus years to our lives.
Yeah, I do rest, and I do enjoy myself, and I do have a good wife that brings joy into my life. But I definitely do take time off to rest. But for me, the most important thing in my life is serving my people and serving humanity. So that's my big joy. And so everyone has their own passions or skills. So I use mine to help my people and work with my people. So That's
Ah,
my joy. So doing
okay.
that is a joy, you know.
Yes, I'm taking some questions that are coming in definitely for you. Hello.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Tata?
Fine, thank you.
Dr. Obert Tashaka, I just want to tell you, my elder brother, you're brilliant. You really are. I just want to say that I over a course of time, I had to go through a transformation of my own self. I spoke on the show once before where I had to leave Detroit because of the crack plague. It had gotten so bad that, around the 80s and the 90s, all the murders I was taken care of. And before that, Detroit was a beautiful city. It was a well-ran city. And because we had our own black mayor and white folks became just, kind of disillusioned, drugs, guns, and Arabs came into our community. And so I wound up moving to Denver, Colorado, and I got a really, really good experience of living at a certain level, experiencing economic success, building on the skills that I had started doing, which as an artist, I was able to take that there and grow it. And I am spiritual, and it took me a minute to really understand it as a black man and as a stolen son of one African. From Africa. And so I was taking a nap one day, and I was into my realm sleep, and Spirit said, it's time for you to go home. And it was 16 years into my being there, and I had just finished one job at an architecture firm. I had another one the next week. And I was okay. I was doing quite well, but Spirit said you had to come home. Now, coming home to Detroit meant coming home to a place that had been ravaged by crack. It had been abandoned. And I, too, was in that world where I was not used to these people. And so it took me years to get used to being around my black brothers and sisters. But what I did and what I came back doing was I built sculptures. I built sculptural furniture that look like us in places where there is no three-dimensional works that look like us. And I teach everybody, but I do get the kids. And it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference in our communities. I was watching the World News BBC not too long ago, about a couple months back, and there was a group leader meeting, and there was about 50 leaders on stage, and all were white but one African brother. And once they finished shaking hands and all that, they all start turning around and shake hands, and you could see him just melting down because he didn't know how to fit. And he wound up crossing his arms. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And so when you talk about us coming out of that colonized state of mind, it's also about, I look at their Hollywood movies, because if you look at European Hollywood movies, they tell you everything you need to know. And like in the movie, the woman with the dragons, the queen of the dragons, that Game of Thrones, whenever she went and set people free, they took off dog collars. That's how they freed their minds. And so I think we as black folks around this world have to psychologically and mentally take off these dog collars that we let these people put on us. And so, but the transformation and healing ourselves and cleansing our minds and re-loving ourselves is the key. And that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for sharing. I mean, we can't say thank you anymore. Thank you so much. Right, Dr. Oba? Yes.
Yeah, I'd say right on. And what the brother described is what hit black communities across the United States, which was the drug traffic and a bunch of other hostile forces that attacked us in our community since 1968. And it created, and this again comes from the light, that my experience with God, that it put our people in a position where the first time in our people's history in the United States, we were put in a position of choosing between two cultures. One, the Euro-American mad culture of individualism, materialism, disrespect of elders, an arbitrariness where oftentimes your behavior is unpredictable, a host of things, or African American or New African culture, which is African based, which is based on truth and justice. It's based on the spirit. It's based on family. It's based on respect for life and respect for your elders. And this has been the big crisis in Black communities ever since. So your decision to leave, to go somewhere else where you could be free of those forces is understandable. And it's good that you made the decision to go back and to work with your people. And all of that has got to do with what you've done with yourself that you can share with others. So that's good. But that's caused by forces that deliberately hit our communities to stop the forward movement of liberation, to create a division between the young and the old. You know, to go back into that and work with that, that's good. You know?
Okay. So yes, I think we don't have many more questions again and reflections. We want to thank you, and we see ourselves on Saturday on your show, Dr. Obati Shaka.
Right on. Well, I've enjoyed it very much, Sister Tata. And again, you're a lovely lady. You're conscious, and that smile's got a lot behind it. A lot of smarts. And I enjoy you, and I'm glad to see you doing what you're doing. And I've enjoyed looking at the comments that come in on these shows, and I've watched other shows that you have. So you're doing a good job in waking our people up and giving people what they need. And this idea of having a commerce platform, very good. Very good.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. So I keep getting my blessings and my wow and the power. Thank you so much. Yeah. So we see ourselves on Saturday on your platform. Another pleasure. So good night.
Night.
Bye. Good night. Good. So my dear family, I have 5 more minutes to spend with you, thanking you, sharing information. And I hear the comments and I read the comments. It's so. You're saying, Dr. Susan, we love you. You have to be aware of that. Kofi's just texting it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I like, Carrie Banks said, and she dressed like a queen. Wow. Really? Sometimes, look, I mean, it's cold out here in Germany and in the studio, so I have to always take my African, my African cloth and cover myself on it. And also, but one more important thing that you've also seen here, have you seen the way our scholars and our professors, and they look like, how they dress, how they carry actually, this pride of an African fabrics. We saw Professor James Small yesterday, or the past days that he's been with us. And today, every time we see Dr. Obati Shaka, he is the king, the king. I mean, you feel royalty, you feel it. I mean, you can't even, it's not a system where people say you have to respect the elders. There has to be some hierarchy. You just feel that is the necessity. The elders are talking to us. So yes, we are looking forward to host King Bongani III of the Embo Kingdom of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's going to be a wonderful show. I know that we informed you yesterday that he was supposed to be on today. No, that was my fault. And after the show, Nesha was like, what were you doing? So she posted another flyer and I saw it and I thought that it was today. So I'm still very sorry for that. But of course, you've enjoyed the conversation of tonight, the lectures of tonight. What is it that you've learned? As we say, the more we wake up, the more we get the freedom. How do you actually feel? I like to get your feedbacks. I mean, because I'm just a different person. I can't lie to you. I'm a different person from what I used to be, even just a couple of months ago, what I used to be. I mean, every day is a new story. Every day is a new awakening. Every day is like a daily food. And so some of you always thinking, Susan, you're working too much by being here. No, 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 no. I'm just tapping into my inspiration and into being me. It's not about somebody working for somebody, but it's for you. How much you want to get, how much you want to tap into this knowledge of your past, of knowing who you are. It is very relevant. And so the more you get, the more you feel free, the more you are you, the more you are real, the more you actually know this is me. We've all been through all these kind of challenges and a lot of trauma. I don't blame anybody, any one of us that are making some decisions that maybe are not right. I cannot. We can regret it, we can cry after, but to be honest with you, we have gone through a lot of pains in our life. We have individually and collectively. If it is not from the external, it's going to be even from the communities that we're in. It is not easy being a Black person. It is not easy being a Black family. It is not easy being a Black race as a general. So we are graciously happy that consciousness is not something that we're begging on people to have. Consciousness is the greatest investment of an African family. Consciousness is the ability for even you that are conscious to awaken all your followers, deep down, even to our families, even to our parents. Most of them are still carrying all these European systems and worships and gods and system and thinking that's something there. So it is our responsibility once you wake up to share this love, to share this unity, this spirit of oneness, this bondness. We might disagree, like we said, we must not be friends, but the wish for one another, for us to progress, to prosper, to stay healthy, to be who we are, is all that we all wish for ourselves. And I think we are doing a tremendous work. We're doing a good thing. None of us is making a mistake just being here. None of us is making a mistake sharing this communication. None of us is making a mistake sharing even other Pan-Africans that are doing the same work. You know, we are grateful. We see our brother Wodemeyer. We see our sister, Dr. Mumbi. We see Juliet Rayan. We see Dr. Arikana. We see Professor Pierre Olumumba, Professor James Small. I mean, all of these voices that are coming up, even our leaders on the continent, brothers and sisters, they still us. Are we going to take a stone and shoot it at them? No way. Are we gonna, if someone is gonna say, like we were talking yesterday about the mob, the community mob, and this is a series that we will continue to hamper on it, killing ourselves in public and even enjoying it in the name of, oh, somebody was a thief, or even somebody that just made a mistake. How come we lost this humanness in us? Who did this to us? It's not fair. And I'm happy that we had Professor James Small, who actually did not miss his word. He just went straight to the point and tell you, this is what is happening to us. We need to be aware and we need to get rid of it. And it starts with the transformation of our consciousness like we had here today. It is no coincidence that we're getting this passation. They've been telling us a lot. Look at how old they are. Look at Dr. Jeffries. How old? And her wife is going to be coming on the show. That's one of the best creative art scholars, the wife of Dr. Jeffries. And she's accepting to be on our show. She's also elderly like the husband. And so look at all this, I don't know, this gift that nature just blessed us with in our generation, to connect with our elders that have been working all their lives for the sake of the liberation of the Africans. We can never pay them. Never. We're just being grateful. So us being here and tapping into this strength, into this knowledge, I mean, you are already there. We already transit in a transition. And so we need to tap a lot. You see, I try to organize them, particularly the elder, because we need to get this knowledge as soon as possible. They need to produce this knowledge. They need to keep it here for us so that we can pass it. It is a whole university that we will share with our children, that will pass it from one generation to the other, from families. But you know what? I've just been going through and also discovering young African queens. And I met this one, she's from South Sudan. I went through her Facebook that also was recommended to me by, as we just see people that we could bring on the show. I'm telling you, this sister, she's just a gem. And we're looking forward to host her. She's gonna have a slot on the Pan-African Daily, and she's advising us, the diasporans and the continental Africans, how we do some kind of mistakes that if we had done things, particularly like African women that just want to come to Europe, or European women, men to Africans that have stayed in Europe for long and they choose, to get a wife. It's not a bad thing. But when I went through what these links were shared and what this sister is just educating us, all of us need to learn, to grow, and to do the right things so that we can enjoy our life and our generation, and we can love ourselves even more. So I want to thank you so much, and we're looking forward to get King Bungane III tomorrow on another conversation. And it's going to be more of like, how did they live? These kingdoms. We've been hearing about politics and how it came, but how could they have allowed him? Because the the Embo kingdom is one of the greatest. I think they're the ones from the Shaka Zulu or whatever, but I didn't want to quote and make a mistake. We will have him here and he's going to tell us all that. So I look forward to sharing this platform again with you. Yes, continue to share the big launch of the Afroworld TV, which is coming up next week, 26 to 28. 3 big days. We're going to focus only with experts talking about how we need to grow, make money through digital commerce. What is coming in our eyes today? Okay. Yes, we have to be in the train. So thank you very much. We see ourselves tomorrow. Good night. Bye-bye. I also do love you with all my mind, my spirit, and my soul. We see ourselves tomorrow.